Welcome to the Collector's Cast, everybody. How you doing, Mike?
Awesome, awesome.
I'm Clint, he's Mike. We're going to do a show today, a very special show about swords, knives, and edged weapons. And normally we do a big build-up intro here and talk about a few things just to get you warmed up. But our guest today is so interesting, and I think it's going to be such a great interview. I'm going to skip the preamble, and why don't we just go right to the fellow that brought these beautiful weapons here.
Yeah, it's the only thing I'm going to say about it is when we come back and you see our guest and you know who he is, you're going to be crazy excited.
Well, what if they don't watch Forged in Fire?
Well, everyone watches Forged in Fire.
Well, he's a handsome guy, so maybe they'll just be excited anyway.
Everyone watches Forged in Fire.
Will be.
And well, people are going to watch this episode and they're going to tell every person they know, watch that episode.
Because they had a great guest on.
Because I just know this guy's going to be great.
We're going to be right back with Dave Goldberg, everybody. See you in a few. And we're back, everybody. And, of course, as promised, we've got our guest with us here on the couch today, and he's brought some lovely things for us to see. Please welcome to our beautiful studio, Mr. David Goldberg. Thank you, David, for coming on. Can we call you Dave?
Dave is good.
And you are a sword maker, a blacksmith, and a former Forged in Fire champion, are you
Why,
not?
yes, I am.
Yes.
Yeah, I helped those boys make that show.
So you were one of the early on blacksmiths that they found?
Yeah, one day I'm sitting in my shop. I'm from Philadelphia, born and raised.
Yep.
I'm sitting in my studio working on some sword fittings. I get a call from this English chap. He says, "Hello, you David Goldberg, the sword maker." I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, talk to me like I don't know about knives and swords." And I said, "Well, what do you know?" And he said, "Well, not too much." Anyway, so Adam, this producer fella from the ITV, was interested in creating something. And he said to me, "I'd like to create a show for the TV where knife makers and sword makers compete against one another."
So you were involved in the original conversation before it was a show.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, cool.
We made the pilot in Seattle and then pitched it to History Channel.
Oh.
And then they picked it up.
Hey, you were part of the pilot. I was not aware that you were in the
I was
pilot.
actually probably one of the first guys that Adam called. And the interesting thing was, I had no idea what this was going to lead to,
Oh, it's just gone crazy.
Oh, my gosh.
And the sale of blacksmithing tools and forges is just through the roof. Whoever makes and sells those is going, yeah, baby,
Yeah,
my time.
exactly.
Well, this interesting you say that, Clint. Dave, so my daughter and is huge into horses, and one time I go to a blacksmith shop and to buy a little a nipper for just filing their feet and
Right, sure.
And I said to the guy, I said, holy smokes, this is a busy place. And the guy said, ever since that Forged in Fire show, he goes, we sell anvils like crazy. He goes, most of our business now is selling forging tools. He goes, like farriers, they're blacksmiths.
Yeah.
He said,
I have good friends that are farriers.
But he said, most of the stuff we're selling to are people who want to make swords and knives.
When he approached me, I've been a sword maker for 35 years. I went to Japan and
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 7 years I spent in Japan. Well, back and forth from Philly to Japan.
And you studied under like a master sword maker then?
I studied under a Kanefusa lineage. I studied under this 23rd generation smith. Wow. So what happened was, in Japan, it's very strict, Like the old dogs, like somebody my dad's or grandfather's age, won't teach gaijin.
Won't teach Western.
Gaijin. Gai is foreign and jin is person. So they won't teach gaijin. But his student, who is a licensed smith, you have to be licensed to make Japanese swords in Japan, would teach me. He would allow his student to teach me. So I studied with him for 7 years. Taro Fusa is his name. Amazing swordsmith. Taught me how to make steel from tamahagane that you make from granulated black iron sand. And then I do that right here in Agassiz where I live.
Cool.
And I dig
right down the street from me.
dig a hole in the ground. It takes about 72 hours to make tamahagane, and so my wife brings me beer and sandwiches while I'm working outside. And it's really an interesting path. In 1985, 7, I made my first knife. And then I've been studying Aikido for 40 years. So when I was a black belt, when I just turned black belt in Aikido, I said to my sensei, you know, I went to college for sculpture and three-dimensional design. I really want to be a sword maker. He says, oh, no, Dave-san, you can't do it. And so I took the challenge. And I went to Japan, found a teacher on my own. Well, I had my girlfriend at the time with me, but anyway, that's another story. So I found this fellow that was willing to teach me, and it just snowballed into this cool life, you know.
No kidding.
Yeah.
No kidding. I had no idea that you had that history going. I knew you were a martial artist. Somebody had told me that before. Well, I think on the show you appeared in a gi, did you not?
I did have my gi on. I typically wear my dogi to work because it's the one I work in is it's a dark color, not the white one that you'd wear in the dojo, but it's gray and it protects you from the sparks and stuff.
Sure. And it's comfortable.
Oh, very comfortable.
Nice. And then that just progressed into this. I know I can't help but think of guys like Steven Seagal that went over and learned martial arts in Japan.
Right.
And
I always appreciated him.
Yeah. People laugh and joke around about it, but he is. What is it? Joe Rogan, I think, said nobody doubts his mastership of his martial art, but they doubt the martial art itself. Is that true? Have you ever heard
thing is, if you don't understand something, it's kind of like ignorance is bliss. So why aren't more people happy? You know, the thing is, he was in the dojo in my friend's dojo in California, and her name is Wendy. And Steve said to Wendy, "Hey, I'm going to go to Japan, and I'm going to learn all the things I need to learn. I'm going to make movies."
Yeah.
And she said, "Okay, Steve, go ahead. Steve-san, you go make some movies." So sure enough, he went to Japan. He met a Japanese girl, married her. Her old man was like this highfalutin sensei. Mm-hmm. And so when he went to Japan, he was fourth degree black belt. And then miraculously, in a few years, he was 7th degree black belt. And I don't know how many years that took him or anything. Nothing saying anything negative about the guy. I really like him. Anyway, long story short, same thing for me. You know, I decided I was going to go, and I went, and I studied, and here I am.
Cool. And you're obviously pretty accomplished at it. Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room. For the audio-only listeners, there are 3 nice-looking swords sitting out on our table that you brought. Can you maybe tell us a little bit? Are these swords you've made?
Yep, I made every part of them.
Wow.
Start to finish. The thing about being in Japan, you learn a skill like you become a steel maker or a blade maker, or you make handles, or you make cases. Usually the handle guys make the cases too, or you make the fittings like the suba and the fuchikashira, the end cap and the collar, and the manuki, the ornaments under the wrap, or you learn how to wrap the handles, or you learn how to polish blades. You only learn 1 or 2 skills, typically. But I was in Philadelphia, and there was no polisher down the street or fitting maker. And what I did is I started out as a jeweler. And so I was a jewelry maker. I was a model maker for a jewelry company in around Philly.
And that was based on your schooling of design, right?
Exactly.
Three-dimensional.
You know, when I got out of school, it was like, how the hell are you going to get a job being an artist? You know, first I became an optician making eyeglasses.
Wow.
I still love eyeglasses. But anyway, I did that for a while, and then I found my way to jewelry, and I worked for this guy in the town I lived, and I was a model maker for him, and I made rings and earrings and pendants and this and that, and helped him make his line. And then I went off on my own and did that for a while, had clients, and same as him, like jewelry stores would call me up and say, "Hey Dave, can you make this ring?" And they'd send me a diamond and some stones, and I'd get the gold, and I'd make a wax, or I'd make it out of metal, and I'd make them a ring.
Cool. Wow. And I like how you say, though, when you're making swords in Philadelphia, there's not a polisher down the street. Like, necessity forced you to become good from fit to finish on every aspect of the sword making,
exactly.
Which is something, maybe an opportunity a lot of sword makers wouldn't find themselves faced with, and it is an opportunity because you just become more well-rounded. I think it's very cool. Are these Damascus blades? Are these
Well,
folded
there's
over
a
and over?
thing about steel that I'll help you with.
Please.
So there's mono steel, which is one layer.
Yeah.
Then there's Damascus steel, which is layered steel of high carbon and a lower carbon steel. That's why you get the dark and the light layers in it, right? But when you make tamahagane and Japanese swords, it's the highest level of making laminated steel. What you do is you take granulated iron sand and then you smelt it in the ground or in a tatara or a furnace, and then you make it into like almost looks like lava, lumps of this tamahagane. Then you take the tamahagane out and you squish it down flat into like a wafer through heat and a press or hammers or whatever. I have a press. I have a 75-ton press I use, and then a hydraulic press, and then you squish it down. Then you heat it up to red hot or orange hot, and then you dunk it in water so it gets brittle, and then you take it out and you break it up into little pieces like quarter or $half size pieces, and they're all jagged and square and
Yeah, no
and,
kidding.
and
That's
stuff.
what I can imagine.
Yeah, and then you fit them together in like a little puzzle on about a 6x4 piece of steel plate with a bar welded to it, and then you make another one, and you make about 5 layers of this or so, depending upon the kind of billet you're making, and then
Cook that all together.
you cook it all together. Basically, you pour liquid clay on it for flux, and then the clay seeps down in between the crevices and whatever.
And just to clarify, these are layers of broken pieces of the Tamagotchi. What did you?
Tamahagane.
Tamahagane. I don't want to call it Tamagotchi because
Tamagotchi
that's
is
one
good.
of those little pets, isn't it? The electric thing.
I don't
or is that
even know.
Tamaguchi? I can't remember. The little electric pet you got to keep alive or something.
Japanese
But no,
pet.
so they're the layers and layers of broken stuff, and then that all cooks together.
Yeah, basically what you do is you take that, and then what you do is you take a piece of rice paper and you dunk it in the water and you wet it and you wrap it around the brick of pieces that are all stacked up, and then you pour the liquid clay over that.
Okay.
And then you take that, you let you don't have to let it dry, but you can let it dry a little bit, and then you can put it in the forge and you bring it up to welding heat. And welding heat is maybe 2,600 degrees, whatever, before the steel, fires and like sparks away.
Yeah.
Just before that, like welding heat. And then you pull it out and you put it in. I put it in my press. I have a really nice hydraulic press that my friend made for me, but you can hammer it too. So what you do is you bring it out when it's hot, and you tap it with the hammer to kind of tap it together, to slightly weld it together a little bit.
Yeah.
To
Pinging.
hold the
You ping it.
Exactly, to hold the brick together.
Sure.
And then you put it back in, pour more clay on it, and then the clay is, you have to use silica clay. You can dig it up in your yard if you find the right stuff, or you can buy it. And then you put it in there, and then you bring it out and you squish it together and then you forge this piece down and fold it. Basically, you forge it down flat, and then you split it, but not all the way through. You leave a little bit, and you fold
So
the
this
brick
is where
in
the
half.
folding comes in.
Exactly.
And then do you do that over and over? You fold it and fold it.
Yep, you fold it and
Because
fold
of course
it.
everybody, I'm not a sword maker by any stretch or even close. I think I forged a chisel once at grade
Oh, that's good.
yeah, I know. I've played around with it a little bit, but I remember the movie Highlander,
Oh, me too.
and they talk about the
loved it.
sword that when the reporter lady who knows all about swords analyzes the sword and finds out that the metal's been folded 600 times or something, technology that didn't exist then. I just love that. So
Yeah.
is that all just a bunch of crap, or is
Nope,
that
that's true. The thing is, Chinese actually are older than Japanese, and they invented the process, or discovered the process, of actually folding this kind of metal, and then taught the Japanese. And the Japanese then perfected it into the Japanese swords.
Wow.
Like, the katana, I brought some katana today, and they are made of tamahagane. And the thing about it, Japanese, is everything that they have done over the hundreds and hundreds of years, they perfect to the nth degree. Like,
Yeah.
in, let's say, 700 AD, they discovered making Japanese swords. And so the smith and his son were in their smithery, their tanren, their forge, and they were making swords, and they made straight swords at that time. And then they sent the warriors out to battle with these straight swords.
Would they be samurai back then?
Well, no, they were before the samurai.
Okay.
And it's actually samurai, but that's okay.
Okay.
It's all right. I speak a little bit of Japanese. Skoshi nihongo hanashimasu.
Okay.
Just a little bit. Anyway, so the cool thing is these guys, well, what happened was the warriors would come back that lived with these broken swords, and then these guys took them, the dad and his son, or the smith, whatever, took it into their smithy and closed the doors and stayed in there for a month and figured out that they could make swords that wouldn't break. And how they did it was they made the edge of the sword hard and the back and body of the sword soft. Well, soft as cold steel. And how they did that was they figured out that they could put a liquid clay resist on the back of the sword and leave the edge exposed.
Yeah, which I think I've seen that technique on Forged in Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do there's a name for that, isn't it?
Well, what it is you quench the Japanese sword in water, not in oil.
Okay.
And you put it into the water relatively straight, or you pre-curve it a little bit, but you basically put it into the water straight, and it comes out curved.
Oh.
So basically, it goes into the water at the temperature that's correct, and then the water acts like it kind of like has a jacket of air between the water and the steel.
Yeah.
And then the water starts dancing on the blade like little fingers, and then eventually it touches the blade when it's cold enough. The blade dips down into the water like the nose dives, and then it comes back up and curves and creates the edge.
So the curve, the natural curve to these happens after the
It
quenching?
happens in the quenching.
In the quenching.
It happens in the hardening of the sword. You can pre-curve it a little bit, but
And do you pre-curve these a little?
sometimes, depending upon the curve you want to come out with. Here, let me show you this sword. So this is a Shinogi Zakuri style sword, and so you see how
Oh, I can see the line right there.
that wavy temper line. That's my signature line. My name is David Goldberg.
Yeah.
And Goldberg means Gold Mountain.
Okay.
And that's a mountain shape. You see
Oh,
the
yeah.
mountain shapes?
Yeah.
So that's my signature hamon.
Hamon, that's the word I was
hamon.
thinking about.
Ha is the edge.
Yeah.
Mon is signature or mark.
Oh.
So the hamon is the signature of the edge.
Geez, you're teaching us more than Doug Markita would.
Doug's a good man. We're friends. He's a good man.
Actually, Mike goes on his morning coffee with Doug Markita every morning and chats with him online.
Dave, how long, because I know people are going to want to know this, how long would it take you to make that sword, start to finish?
And all the fittings and the lacquer
Everything,
and
yeah.
everything they
Until
handle.
it's sitting here in front
Till
of
it's
us.
sitting here like this.
I would say a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About a month at work.
And now, what would a person, this is not a sword you go see, in a store. This is handmade by a custom craftsman or a master craftsman. What would something like that sell for roughly?
That particular blade's 10 grand.
Yeah.
And then some of them are less and some of them are more. All three of these are about that. This one on the bottom is just a little bit less. This is about a $7,500 sword. This one is, it's got a big groove down the
Sit back
sword.
down in front of the mic as you're
Sure,
talking
sure.
so we can pick up you.
This has got a real big groove in the sword. You see that? That groove in the
Yeah,
sword?
and that's called a
Bohe.
bohe. That's not the word I was thinking of. That what
Maybe
is-
a fuller.
Yeah, a fuller.
Yeah,
is what
fuller
I-
would be English.
Okay.
A bow, a he means groove.
Okay.
Bow is large.
A large group.
So it's a large groove. And the reason for the bohe is to lighten up the sword and also to make a sound in your ear so you can, when you're learning, also, people like them for different reasons. Originally, they were made to lighten the sword, and so you could hear the sword.
Yeah.
With a sword, a Shinogi Sukuri, like the other one, that has no bohi. Well, I can explain the different parts of the sword if you'd like, but the bohi is in the Shinogi-ji. The Shinogi is the side ridge line, and the bohi is always above the side ridge line before the mune, the roof.
So even the individual pieces of the blade are all identified. And
Oh yeah, everything's got a name. Every single piece.
Well, wouldn't that fuller or what do you call it?
Bohi.
Bohi. Now this is just ignorance, and maybe I'm wrong, but would that not add strength too? Like the way you
Well,
get
it
a roof
adds
of a,
strength.
If you look at a roof
vertically,
of
like
a van,
for example, if you're cutting,
Yeah.
it's like an I-beam.
Yeah.
Has strength, but laterally, it's not as strong as the Shinogi's
because you removed the material.
You removed the material, so it's lighter.
But you know what I mean? Like when you look at a roof of a van, there's always ribs because it's just a
Exactly.
straight flat piece.
So
never
yes,
has
it
the
makes
strength.
it strong for cutting. And the nice thing about it, just let me get up for a sec. I know you got some sound things here. And
All sorts of things.
when you cut with a sword like this correctly,
Yes.
it
Oh.
makes a sound.
Yeah, I could hear that.
Sound is from the bohi, so the air. Basically, the sword is cutting the air,
Yeah.
and that's how you hear the sound. On a classic Shinogi Sukuri or Shinogi style sword without a bohi, you wouldn't hear it as much. It would just go very light.
But that's got a real.
Yeah, that's a nice.
They'd
sound.
use that sound effect for like all sword fights or something,
Yeah.
or if Zorro was cutting a Zed.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Hey, I grew
Zorro
up
probably
watching
wishes he
Zorro.
would have had a sword like that.
I grew up watching Zorro. Well, that was one of those little pointy.
We're about the same age.
I'm 52.
I'm 63.
Well, you were close enough. I just look old. Don't worry. A lot of people make that mistake,
No,
Dave.
I just think we're about the same age.
Well,
We went to different high schools together.
I say that all the time. Our old friend Ted Lyon says that we grew up going to different schools together. He's 82.
Exactly, yeah.
And yeah.
I got to ask you another question, Dave, because this, in the, say, Second World War, I'm a little bit of a war historian, but the Japanese had swords.
Yep, katanas mostly.
Katanas, yeah. And a lot of those swords were taken from them, and then soldiers would send them back, or they came back to the U.S. with them. Are there a lot of those swords floating around?
Yeah,
And would
there
that
are.
have been a sword like this?
Very much like this.
Yeah.
I actually have one. I've had few over the years, several over the years, but I still have one. The thing about the swords that were brought back or sent back from the war, they typically weren't taken care of very well. And the guys didn't know how to oil them. They rusted, or they got chipped, or they got chipped in battle, whatever. But I found one time at a gun show in Allentown, Pennsylvania. So I was at this gun show, and I saw a couple of swords this guy had on his table, similar to that in a rack. And I picked one up. It was kind of okay. And then I picked the next one up, and it was the coolest, nicest, most beautiful sword I ever saw in military mounts, in a gunto mount. Gunto is the military mount. It's got a steel scabbard, or saya as it's called in Japanese, and it had a wrapped handle, but it had military mounts. And I looked at it and I was like, how the fuck is this thing so beautiful? There's no scratches, there's nothing wrong with it. I said, how much you want for this sword? He said, oh, that's pretty expensive. That's $350.
Oh, geez.
I said, oh, okay. Well, we take 3 1/4. He says, yeah, sure. So I gave him 3 1/4 American dollars, and I took it. I still have that sword, and next time I come over, I'll bring it.
Cool.
It's so beautiful. It's perfect.
I got another thing for you, because people, the sword stuff is fascinating, but I mean, a lot of people don't know. I mean, Forged in Fire is like unbelievable. I mean, that show is a phenomenon all over the world.
Yeah.
And
Just like the collector's cast.
and just like there's people, when I tell them that I live down the street from you, they're like, what? And like a lot of people don't realize that Dave Goldberg, Forged in Fire champion, lives in Agassiz, British Columbia.
You who'd have thunk it?
Who would have thunk it, right? And I got to tell a funny story about when I first met Dave. There was a little secondhand store in Agassiz.
Oh, yeah.
And there was
At the
one
trading post.
At the trading post, and there was
Yes.
one of your swords was there. And I looked, and I mean, I'm not a sword expert, but I know a
Good
costume
quality,
sword
right?
from a.
Yeah.
And I said, "Where did you get the real sword?" And she said, "Oh, it's Dave Goldberg's." And I went, "Dave Goldberg, Forged and Fire champion?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, "How the heck did you get that?" And she said, "Well, he lives right over there." And I said, "Over where?" She goes, "Well, you could see his roof from here." And then,
Right down the street from you?
right down, but then
hadn't you
the
seen
door
him working
opened.
in-
But what happened? The door opened and you walked in. You were looking for a key or something. You asked her if she had an
yeah.
old key. And I was like,
Oh, yeah, right. I remember that.
So we started chatting, and I said, "You know how many times I drove by your driveway, and there's all this forging stuff out there?" And I'd say to my daughter, "I got to stop and talk to that guy. I want to see what's going on over there." And my daughter said, "Dad, you're going to embarrass me. Don't do it. Do it when you're by yourself."
That's how
But-
you make some of the best
yeah.
friends, going and seeing what people are doing.
Just down
It's
the
also
street
a way
from
to get
me.
shot once
Yeah,
in a while. but,
and so
if you take the chance.
leading to this, so what's going on with you now?
I'm making swords full time, and basically I have a restoration company. Well, I'm Kinzon Forge is my website, but I make swords and I refurbish antique swords, and so my daily job basically is refurbishing antique swords, war swords and much older swords, all Japanese stuff. I have a friend of mine, and from Portland, Oregon. His dad, may he rest in peace, had this company forever. I mean, I was dealing with him and helping him with his swords for 25 years. And Fred, it's called Fred Lohman Company. And Fred was the only guy in the United States that was the authentic guy that could really polish your sword or wrap your handle or make a case or whatever. And he had guys working for him and this and that. And I worked with him for years. And then, as I said, he walked the Rainbow Bridge, may he rest in peace. And his son, Chris, took over the company, and he and I worked together weekly, monthly, whatever. He sends me about 4 swords a month that I refurbish.
So that's a full-time gig.
Yeah, that's my full-time
And,
job.
You know, something we've been missing here too. This whole interview is we do remind people this is the Collector's Cast, and we talk about collecting. And this whole episode is about edged weapons, collecting swords and knives, and so on. So that brings me to the big question. You yourself, are you a collector? Obviously, you must have a lot of stuff kicking around.
I am. I was an antique dealer when I was 26.
Oh, wow.
Back in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Before swords.
No kidding.
But I was doing martial arts, doing Aikido. And I would take my sensei, my Japanese teacher, to the flea market on the weekends when he visited town. He lives in Nagoya, Japan. And when he would come to Philly, we would go to the flea markets on the weekends, and he would buy all kinds of stuff. He was into pottery. What he really liked was wooden shafted golf clubs, because the Japanese guys were into like playing golf and buying these clubs.
With vintage clubs, though?
Yeah,
With wooden
but this
shafts,
was
that's
back in the day. But this was after they already had made better clubs than that. But he bought them up we bought them from anywhere from $5 to $20 a club, and he'd bring them back to Japan. I taught him about pottery, and I taught him about China and stuff like that, and antique iron and different things, and he taught me Aikido, and that's where I got my start in Aikido.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm no stranger to flea markets myself. Obviously, I was going to ask you, so when you came in here and looked around the shop...
I felt like I was home.
Right on.
I have
Well, you
many.
know, we don't have forever time to do this interview. In fact,
No,
we're
I'm
getting
fine.
towards the end. But one thing we do on our show every time is a trivia question. And I thought it'd be fun, rather, before you go away, let's do the trivia question now with you sitting here on the couch, and you can play along too. And Aiden went and found this question earlier. So the question is, how old would be the oldest edged weapon ever discovered?
Wow, that's a good question.
Oh.
I know that Japanese swords were developed in about 650, 700.
Okay.
And
80.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
And before that would have been what, Bronze Age?
Chinese swords. Yeah, well, there was the Bronze Age before that.
Yeah,
of
because it's
course.
saying first edged weapon. I'll give you that hint that it's the first ever edged weapon. So we might not be talking about steel.
Bronze it is.
Well, I'm going to just tell
How
you.
about this?
Okay.
I think probably the first edged weapon was made out of stone.
Now he's got it. Yeah. The answer is 2 million years old. It was a stone weapon of some. Did it elaborate on what
2
kind of-
million?
Million.
Yeah. So Fred Flintstone's original butter
Holy
knife.
crapper.
Yeah. Thanks for telling me about when swords were made originally.
Well, hey, no. Hey, man, I figured we'd keep you on for the answer. But yeah, I knew you were thinking steel only. But yeah, as it turns out,
Trick question.
stone-edged weapons.
Well, I remember the arrowheads and like the hatchets and stuff.
I've run over a piece of shale in my old 4x4 Bronco with big, thick mud tires, and it went right through like a arrowhead.
Yeah.
And that's just natural shale chipping off the way it should. You know? And these flint napper guys,
And
they
the
got
flint,
really good at
Now,
it.
I learned a long time ago when I was going around doing knife shows, and this guy was a flint napper I met, and he had all these arrowheads and little knives he made. And the way they do it is to take a piece of copper. Nowadays, I don't know about back then, I guess it was not a piece of stone, but they take a piece of copper and they nap it with a piece of copper and a piece of leather on the copper, and then the leather, I guess, is to hold it, and then they use the copper to nap the flint off. I guess the copper's kind of soft and it grabs onto the
Yeah.
Or maybe the leather has something to do with keeping it sharp, like the way you sharpen on a strop. I don't know.
I don't actually think so. Sorry to disagree.
No,
with you.
I'm just
I just think that was a
shooting
way
at,
of holding on to this.
Yeah,
flint,
oh,
right?
I'm just shooting.
But
at,
anyway, I really I appreciate you teaching me about the old.
Hey, I just learned about it
knives.
too. We say that on this show, we don't just teach, we learn. We learn all the time, and I probably
This is a
learned
cool show.
5 or 6 things. Thanks, man. Well, you know
Thanks for
what?
coming,
We enjoy
Dave.
doing it, and we're going to keep doing it. Every Friday, a new episode drops. You can see yourself
yeah?
on this one coming up. Yeah.
Oh,
and,
nice.
We'll make sure we give you a heads up so you can.
Yeah, give me a heads up.
Can you
shoot me
imagine
a
what it's going to
text.
be like to see yourself on TV?
Oh my gosh.
That's going to be strange, isn't
I
it?
hope I comb my hair good.
Why? I never do. I watch a few episodes. I got strings going out this way. It's like, oh, well, we can't afford a makeup and hair person yet. When that happens, you'll be back.
This is such a neat shop or neat.
I have one last question. Is there any possibility we see you on Forged in Fire again?
You know, that's a good question. They are interested in what they're interested in, and sometimes they have showdowns with old guys that were on there before. I was on the first time and I won, and then I crashed my Triumph, and and I was recovering, and I think it was about maybe a year later or so, and they called me 3 times, and I begged off on twice, and then the woman called me again. And I said, Mo, my wife's name's Momo. And I said, Mo, this is the girls of Forged in Fire calling me to come back. I better go or they're not going to call me again. So I went back, and I didn't win that episode. I went to the second level, but I didn't go to the final.
That's how I knew about your motorcycle accident, is because I remember seeing you on the show and they talked about it on the
And
show.
You had some little goofy thing happen with your handle, didn't you?
Yeah, what it was this. We our job was, so we went back home to make our own swords, and they wanted us to make a D-guard short sword. Sure. And it was, it's very time consuming, and you have to work like right to the last minute to get the thing done.
And they're watching you, with those camera crews out
Oh,
there timing
yeah.
you. Like
And the thing was, I didn't have a shop back in Philly. One of my teachers, the guy that taught me how to make mosaic Damascus, Robert Eggerling, he's a master smith, lives in right by Philly, and he invited me to come to his studio, his shop in Mertztown where he lives, and so I could do this Forged in Fire thing. And he didn't have any epoxy, and I forgot to bring epoxy, and I didn't have my shop, so I didn't have like all these different size brass or copper rods to make the pins. So I just kind of jury rigged it together without epoxy, and I thought, oh, it'd hold up. So then, sure enough, Jay Nielsen cut the antlers right through them. My sword was great. The Damascus was awesome. It was canned Damascus. We made it out of canned
it fell
Damascus.
at the handle?
But the handle got a little loose, and then it cut through everything. It sliced through everything they did. The rope,
Jay Nielsen's the guy that's known for beating the crap out of
oh
swords.
yeah, he does. Anyway, Doug Markite is my friend, and so is Jay and Dave Baker. They're all good guys, and so it was doing it, and then the handle came loose. The handle scale came off, and he says, "Oh, Dave, your handle scale came off," and I said, "Yeah, but the knife cut, didn't it?"
Did they show that and bleep it? Or?
They bleeped it.
Yeah,
they don't say it because I was cussing,
Yeah.
Oh,
they
said,
bleep
and
a lot
plus,
of stuff.
I didn't win, so it's they cut the shit out.
Are we bleeping on this show?
No, I think
Unfortunately.
Oh, do we bleep?
Yeah.
I don't remember. I've dropped a couple of swear words. I think.
You can cut them out.
I
They
can't
know
talk.
what I'm saying.
I can't talk without swearing, I don't think. Anyway, you know what? We're running very low on time. Dave, it's been a fantastic occasion to have you here and talk to us. I feel like we could go down 100 rabbit holes, like your whole history with being an antique dealer. Shit, I could talk to you for 2 hours about that alone.
Yeah.
And just all the stuff you do. And I think there's more here. We definitely got to have you back again.
I'll come back.
Edge weapons are cool. Nobody gets on people for collecting swords. You notice that? Like everybody,
Yeah.
there's gun control in the world. And they say, well, how can you own a gun? I have a couple of guns because, they're dangerous. People get killed. Well, I got a wall full of swords next door in my shop, and I've never cut anybody's head off either. So
I just want to say something. I collect guns. When you picked up that sword and when you
swished it.
down there, it was frightening. It made a frightening sound, and I was just like, whoa.
I was at the airport today picking my son-in-law up. He was out Calgary, and he came back. I was sitting in the waiting area, waiting for him to land, and there were some people, a nice Russian couple, walking their dog around. And I was commenting on their dog. We ended up talking, and sure enough, we got talking about, and it got into knives and this and that. And she's buying a serrated Damascus knife from me.
Oh, just like that.
Just like that.
And the legend continues of David Goldberg and the making of edged weapons. Hey, Dave, it's been great having you on.
Awesome, Dave.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot,
Really
Dave.
grateful to you guys.
Right on.